Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And we're going to have so much fun today because we're going to be talking about something that is the basic for every single person in business. It's a skill that we all need to know. So please join me in welcoming Donna Griffit to our program today. Welcome, Donna. How are you?
I'm great, Deb. Thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Well, us redheads, we got to stick together, right? Right?
Yeah. Red jacket. We got the whole.
I know.
Red letter day.
Yep. Well, let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will dive into this. So Donna Griffit is a world-renowned corporate storyteller, pitch alchemist, and best-selling author of Sticking to My Story, The Alchemy of Storytelling. There it is. She's showing it. She's being Vanna White. Sticking to My Story, The Alchemy of Storytelling for Startups. Donna has worked globally for 2 decades in over 30 countries with Fortune 500 companies, startups, and investors in a wide variety of industries, helping them create, edit, and deliver powerful presentations, pitches, and messages. She magically spins raw data into compelling stories that captivate audiences and drive results. Here's the important part, folks. Through her guidance, her clients have raised over $1.5 billion with a B dollars. So again, Donna, welcome.
Again, great to be here. Thank you so much for that opening. Wow.
Perfect. I love it. I love it. Well, I always like to find out from my guests how it is that they got to where they are today, because I think that's a very important thing that people really want to know about. So how is it that you got to where you are today?
So this is a great question because there's so many different ways to answer it. And just, as our first tip of the day with storytelling, you are the author of your story. When somebody asks you this, you can choose where you want to start from.
Right.
It doesn't have to be chronological. So let's see, where shall we start from today? So storytelling isn't something that I grew up knowing, like, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a storyteller. It didn't really exist when I was young. And when I first started calling myself a storyteller, people were like a librarian or something like that. So, so storytelling as a business concept has only really grown in acknowledgement for the past 10 years, I'd say. So I grew up loving acting, loving working with people. And when I was 16 and I heard that there was this thing called drama therapy, I was like, that's what I want to study.
Right.
And everything towards my master's degree was geared towards that. Because, as much as I loved acting, I didn't want to be a starving artist waiting tables at the age of 30. And I got into NYU, did my master's in drama therapy. This was throughout 9/11 and all kinds of drama in New York. And then found out that the options for getting a job as a drama therapist were basically that of a starving artist. And I'm like, yeah. And I was looking for like, okay, what can I do with all of my different skills and talents? And one of my professors at NYU mentioned that she had a friend that would travel the globe, give workshops, motivate, speaking on, like, that's what I want to do. Where do I learn that? And NYU had a continuing professional postmaster's program in training and organizational development. I started that, sent my resume into the very first place that I saw listed on Craigslist for corporate trainers, and was hired by a wonderful company called Lawyer Communications Group. I got to travel the world, literally from Taiwan to Glastonbury, Connecticut, from South Africa to a lot of the European countries. So I was in Copenhagen. There are lots of really great places, and teach people how to give great presentations, write clearly, be confident, and always hunky-dory until 2008.
Right. And
So
you
those
were
are
kind of in that financial world.
Well, the financial world kind of affects everything. And the first thing that goes in organizations is training
Right.
that's inessential. So my schedule was wiped clean, and so was the slate. So it was time to reinvent. And as luck and serendipity would have it, somebody introduced me to someone who needed help with his speeches. He was a cardiothoracic surgeon, and he had also created two inventions, medical devices. It was my first foray into startups. He asked me to create pitch decks for him for a big angel conference he had been selected to pitch at. And I was like, okay, startups. Sure. Haven't done that before, but there's always a first
sure.
And then I actually traveled with him and presented on his behalf with him in the room. And then the other companies got up to present. And it was like, oh my God, painful. I was like, my heart just ached for them.
But at the same point, you're thinking, we got this.
Well, I was thinking, actually, why didn't they work with someone like me towards this important event? You've got people, 80 investors sitting there that could throw millions of dollars at your company. Why wouldn't you prepare? And then it was just like this, okay, there's my next niche, because there isn't really anyone in the storytelling space for startups. It was like, that's my next path. And here we are. Many years later, pretty much the same landscape. I've worked with over 1,000 VCs, startups, and accelerators, and Silicon Valley giants like Facebook and Google. Like you said, helped my clients raise upwards of $1.5 billion. And I have the best job in the world. Somebody called me the polisher of diamonds. And it's true. There's so many incredible innovations and entrepreneurs out there that just struggle to tell their story. And I'm there to help them do it.
I love it. I love it. And I was reading your book, which again, Vanna, show your book, Sticking to My Story, The Alchemy of Storytelling for Startups. And the main premise of the book is that you're pitching to investors, venture capitalists, angel funders, all of those. But of course, as I was reading it, I thought this is for everybody, because the same concepts of getting clients and convincing them to give you money is the same thing. And it's also the same as if we're pitching ourselves, as a consultant. It is the same information that goes in there. And so I love that, because with just a little bit of tweaking, it's all the same thing, because it's the same story.
Stories are universal. And it's probably one of the only universal things that all religions have and all cultures have.
And have had for, ever.
For thousands and thousands of years. And we all need it as a skill for anything that we're trying to be persuasive on.
Right.
So I had somebody write me just over the weekend and say, I'm reading the book and my clients are not startups, but I find myself giving them guidance from the book on, telling better messages and sharpening their story. This is not just for startups, and it isn't just for startups. Storytelling is this concept that we all should be. I started off doing it for startups because otherwise it would have been like a 600-page book.
Right.
So I had to kind of segment it a bit.
Yeah.
But there's
so when you write part 2, we'll have you on again.
I would love that. I would love that. So yeah, that's the plan, Stan.
I love it. And as you said, we use stories all the time. In fact, I'm told that I do stories too much. But I think so many professionals think we shouldn't tell stories, especially when we're asking for money, whether it's investment or to buy a product or things like that. They are saying, you have to just be strictly business. You have to be professional. Yes.
And that's like intuitively wrong. We think that we sound important and smart by throwing in a lot of terminology and words and showing how much we know, when in fact what we're doing is putting a wedge between us and the listeners.
Right.
Because investors are human, customers are human, and they have the same brain as we do when it comes to taking in information. And we need to be able to get to them in a way that doesn't just address their top of mind questions, but what's on their hearts and their guts also. Right. And that's what storytelling really is able to do. So people are not going to remember your numbers, your facts, your figures, your tech stack. They are going to remember the stories about you.
Mhm.
So case in point, one of the stories I tell in the book is about Cure Life. And they're a wonderful company where the founder, Ron, set out on a quest to basically cure diabetes for his father, who had been diagnosed in his 50s. So the stories in the book, I don't want to spoil it, but I will give you a little behind the scenes.
Yes, a teaser.
So it's such a great story, and it's so beautiful how like he stopped his life basically to figure out a way. And not only has he helped his father get his diabetes under control, he's helped so many people around the world. But interesting little story about how stories stick and resonate. A few months ago, Ron asked me to work with his VP sales and director of US sales on the sales deck. And I said, of course, I'd love to. And he sent me a very pretty looking sales deck, but the story wasn't there.
Right. Lots of facts and figures, probably.
Yeah. Well, and the ingredients of their flagship pills, the supplements. And I said, guys, where's the story? They said, which story? I said, the Ron and Rafi story. Where is it? And they said, oh, we're meeting with companies like Whole Foods. We only get a little bit
care
with them. We don't have time for a story. And I said, here's where you're wrong. Because they're not going to remember what ingredients you have in your supplement and what your supply chain does. They hear a million of those. They're going to remember that you're the company whose founder put his life on hold to set out on a quest to solve this because he had a personal connection. And then guess what they told me? The director of US sales and the VP sales both had fathers that had been diagnosed with diabetes.
Yeah.
So we're not just the founder, but this company is on a mission because they were touched by diabetes on a very personal level, and they saw the level of suffering of someone they love, and they joined this as a mission. Now that will stick.
Right. Yeah. And as you said, they're not going to remember, okay, it's 4 pills and this is the regime and yada, yada, yada. They're going to remember, I helped my dad. I mean, that's what it comes down to, because, whatever, like you said, is Whole Foods. They want to help their customers. That's why they were founded, to provide better nutrition, all of those things. And so when you say, I helped my dad, now you don't have to go into huge detail. And I think that's the other thing people, and that's the other thing that I do. You go into too much detail, right? So you just say, I founded this company to help my dad. He was a type 2 diabetic. This is what we did. And this is what we now do with the company. And then you go on from there.
Absolutely. And sometimes we feel this need to fill the void with way too many details because we're either afraid that they're not going to get it, or we're afraid we're going to not look like we know enough. So we just toss all of these numbers. In fact, it's like, I just was literally working with a client right before I got onto this session, and my eyes were bleeding because they had so many spreadsheets and numbers, and then a screenshot of a dashboard that was so tiny that it looked like ants walking across. And I'm like,
goody.
This is not serving you.
No.
You need to extract the meaning of these to be able to tell the story. Nobody's going to sit there looking at line L2 of your spreadsheet, figuring out what that means. You need to bottom line it. People have zero attention span, and it's just getting worse.
Right.
And we need to spoon feed them the most important.
Right. And have that other stuff ready, because, say you're talking into wild oats. I mean, they might want their nutritionist to talk to you. So then they want to know what's in it. What is this? And so you've got that. But if you haven't hooked them in with that story, you're not going to hook them in at all.
No, absolutely. That's your hook, but it's also the way to keep them there. So there's 2 pieces to the storytelling, which I talk about in the book. One is the structure of it. And there's a very intentional structure of a story. And we're talking tens of thousands of years of storytelling, from early cave paintings through Aesop's fables, through Greek tragedies, and down to an Instagram story. There's a very specific way a story is told, and our brain is hardwired for that way. So if you create your pitches, whether it's an investor pitch or a sales pitch, with this very intentional structure, which you'll see in Hollywood movies too, just you don't realize the structure's there. And then if you do that, and then you weave in stories that stick, you're giving them this double stickiness. So you're giving them the structure that helps them ingest the data, but you're also giving them these moments, which will be what they take away. Oh, I met this company today. You won't believe what they do. And then they have that mental sticky note.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk about the structure, because I think that is really the downfall of most people. They get started and then they ramble and they go off, and they're, we were talking before, squirrel, and so in your book, you call it chunking. So let's talk about that, because to me, that was very important, because it keeps, and maybe the screenplay is a great way to think about that. You've got the things that are in specific order, and that way it makes sense. But talk to us about that in detail.
So the chunking, look, and that's exactly what I'm talking about with the structure of our brain. Growing up as kids, and those of you listening that have young children or grandchildren, you see they have this endless capacity to take in new things and to remember it and to repeat it to us. As we grow older, our hard drive is fuller, and our operating system has not been updated for a while. And also we know a lot. As kids, we lack the frame of reference if we haven't learned it before. So why should we argue with the teacher about it? But as adults, we can argue and can say, wait a minute, I don't buy that. That doesn't sound right to me. Or I learned something else, or that, so we'll get into it, or we'll just disconnect and be like, yeah, this is not important. So the principle of chunking is what actually helps the adult brain learn better.
Okay.
So it's taking it and chunking it into the formula is 5 + 2 - 2, meaning like between 3 to 7 chunks of information. And think about it, Deb, our license plates, our phone numbers, our social security numbers are chunked into 3, 3, 4. So it's easier for us to remember those chunks of 3 numbers. And that's what the brain needs. So if we chunk all of our information into 4 buckets or acts, as I call them, being in sticking with the theater theme, then it's going to be much easier on their brain and what they take in.
Right.
It's the flow of the story as well. So you're actually, each of these chunks, each of these acts contain several tens, dozens of questions that you're answering. But what you're doing is you are getting in line with their brain and thinking of the questions that they have ahead of time, and then answering them as you go. So you're building trust as you go.
Right. Let's be honest. Sometimes part of that process is y'all figure out this isn't going to work. Okay. Then you go merrily on your way. And because we've all, we've been sold to when it was just, it was not going to happen, and they just won't give up. And pretty soon you're just, but, and we've, I don't want to waste somebody's time telling them, here's why you should work with me, or whatever it is, if there's no interest now. But the story is, again, what helps you determine that interest, because they might initially think, why would I want to work with a redhead? And for those of you who are just listening, we are both redheads.
Yes.
And so, it is, and the story then is what makes them change their mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So people might come in as skeptics, and you have the opportunity in the first few minutes to make them believers.
Right.
And stories do it. Big numbers tell stories. Ready to make them believers. They can't argue with the fact that you have growth and you have achievements and you have revenue. I mean, that means something to an investor, because it means somebody's buying your product, somebody's drinking your champagne or eating your dog food. And we have to be able to wow them with that from the get-go, pull them in and make them engage, and then little by little, in a sense, convert them. So okay, at first they were very stone-faced, and then little by little the resistance starts to melt.
The skeptical brow reduces.
And then you're telling a story that resonates with them, because stories resonate, and they nod a little bit, and it reminds them, and there's a part of their brain called the insula that starts looking for something that, that reminds me of the time that I had a situation like that. So they've opened up, they're in sync with you, they're listening to you, and then you have the opportunity to now show them how you truly will impact this story, this pain, this need that you're displaying.
Right.
It's magic.
one of the things that people have asked, when you talk about this, is truth. Does your story have to be 100% true? Can you embellish it? Can you totally make it up to fit the situation? So what do you tell people when they say, Donna, I've never had that happen.
Disclaimer, let me make this clear. I am not telling you to lie. Storytelling does not mean lying. And we've had some very unfortunate cases of founders in the past.
Yeah, I mean, if you lie, you're going to get what you deserve. Let's just be honest about that.
Eventually you will. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there seeing what happened to Elizabeth Holmes and what's about to happen to Samuel Bankman-Fried and be like, oh, wow, I've got a big lie out there that I hope they... So I'm not encouraging you to lie, and you should never lie about your numbers.
Right.
Never lie about your
especially if you're asking investors, because they're eventually going to want to see your numbers.
Yes, they are. And vanity metrics do not pass due diligence. And also, I mean, like in Elizabeth Holmes' case, what's funny is she's actually, I think today is the day she's supposed to report to prison, but she's not even been sentenced for putting people's life at risk. It was for defrauding investors. Right. But I think that the whole idea of the fact that she did, to me, the most awful thing was that people's life was put at risk. So never, ever, ever lie about something that could endanger someone or that has to do with your numbers or anything around that. Now, with storytelling, the story doesn't have to be exactly 100% verbatim details. So I had a journalist call me about a year ago. He was doing an article on startup stories and how they've, it changes. He's like, so we had this one company that when they first came out, they said, we got the idea from an investor that we spoke to. And then a few months down the road, they were talking about a sick uncle. He's like, so what do you say about that? I say, well, maybe they were clients of mine. Because if there is a sick uncle in there, and let's hope our uncles and our family are well, but if there is something in there that somewhere that you may not even realize was a motivator or a catalyzer, definitely tell that story.
Right.
That's going to be what sticks. If you have a personal connection, I gave a webinar today for about 200 founders, and we have a lightning round at the end where they give their elevator pitch, and I go into Donna GPT mode and on the spot give them that. So each one of them, my first question was, why did you choose this to work on? And pretty much everyone had a personal connection. So go from the place of your personal connection, your passion, whether it's a sick relative or whether it's just, I'm a web designer. And one of the things I saw with small business owners is that they're so reticent to take on any automation or anything because they're scared of it. But the data they could get from it could be invaluable to them. So I decided to quit my company and start a new one, which was an automated automation for this. So, but you're coming from a place of understanding. You're coming from a place that also credentials you and shows your expertise, and it just goes over much smoother.
Right. And again, if you're going to say something that is not true and can be researched, I think we should just call it the DeSantos rule, right? And don't make up your credentials. Don't do anything. And I think we've all seen that, and it bites you. I remember one time I was on the board of a nonprofit, and we were hiring a new CEO. So we're going through his resume, and he had said he formerly was the CEO of X company, and then he listed a person for a personal reference. We called, and they said, "Who?"
No. Oh, no.
And I mean, it was obviously very uncomfortable for everybody, because then it was like, well, maybe we called the wrong place, maybe, and we went back to the gentleman and said, there's an issue, and he swore up and down that he had worked for him. So I don't know what the catch was. But, we've seen that where somebody has said, I won X award, or, as we've seen, I have X degree, X certification. And it's pretty easy to find those things out. If you're a publicly traded company, it's really easy to find a bunch of stuff out, especially from a financial standpoint. So, don't fudge on that.
No,
it's just, it's not worth it.
And it's not just that. So talking about ChatGPT, which I mean, AI is a huge a buzz right now everywhere. And I think it's really important to know these. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, it makes up a lot of stuff. Yes, it does, because it's trained on models up till 2021. But it's funny because I asked ChatGPT, just out of curiosity, to write me a bio. And most of the stuff was accurate. And then
I did the same thing. I'm like, wow, it actually even found me. I mean, that was impressive.
And it did, and then there were a few things like, oh, I've never spoken there, or oh, I've never done that. So I'm like, oh, thank you, ChatGPT. But again, these things will be found out. So whether you're using ChatGPT or you're using yourself, make sure that you are upfront. Now, it's not to say you can choose, like I said at the beginning, how you got here. You can choose how to tell the story. You could choose what numbers to showcase, but don't try to hide things, and don't try to lie about things that can be found out.
Right. Yeah. Now you can take, shall we say, a little poetic license, maybe, in some instances.
For sure.
And you can certainly say, something hypothetically. I mean, so then people know, okay, this is total fiction. And the funny thing is I've seen them do hypotheticals when it's a true case, but they didn't want, they didn't want to give anybody's name away.
You can do hypotheticals. You can also anonymize a case, because let's say you're a company working with cyber and you have a client that you dealt with their ransomware. You don't, you don't
want to say, when I worked with, X company.
Yeah. So, but there's a big difference between anonymizing it or slightly. So one of the stories I talk about in the book, I call it the Tokyo story. It was very, very technical founders, and they were like going on and on about their technical background. And then one of them, and I just wasn't getting it. And one of them then said, this one time in Tokyo. And then I'm like, oh, you came up with the idea in Tokyo? And they're like, no, we came from a background of computer vision. I'm like, okay, guys, you came up with the idea in Tokyo. Okay.
Yes.
Now, it doesn't matter if they went to Tokyo and realized they were lost in translation, looking at all these beautiful buildings, not being able to figure it out. And they thought, what if we could create something that helped us on the spot, image identifiable where we are? Or if they first started working on the idea and then went to Tokyo, and that decision was just heightened.
Right.
So the investors aren't going to ask to see their passport.
Right.
That's the kind of thing that you can afford to have poetic license with your story.
Right.
But when it comes to the numbers and the deals and the sales, and that's where you don't want to.
Right. And one of the things that strikes me as you're talking about this too is knowing who you're talking to. So doing your research about them, and you've got great questions in your book of all these various things. I mean, pages and pages of questions that you should be going through and answering before you ever really do this. A lot of it's like, what are your competitors doing? Things like that. But you absolutely have to know who you're talking to. And, it's kind of along the lines of, are you giving a presentation to sixth graders or college graduates? You're going to use different language. I spent time working for the American Cancer Society, and I always had to tell the doctors, you have to dumb it down, because they wanted to use the words that had, 20 characters in them. And I said, now you can mention that, but then you have to say, so in essence, it's this and this and this, because most of the people aren't going to get that. But if they were speaking to, say, oncologists, and if they didn't use the technical term, then they were going to be looked down on it. And so it is so important to do your research and tailor your story for that audience.
So absolutely. And again, so let's distinguish. If you're a doctor and you're speaking to your peers, you need to speak in their language.
Right.
If you have a mixed audience, which usually you will, you need to aim for the lowest common denominator. And you need to make it interesting and fresh and relevant for everyone. Now, I don't think of it as much as dumbing it down as rather elevating our audience.
Right.
They're not dumb. They don't need us to dumb it. I know people, we use that, but think about it for a second. We don't want them to feel like, oh, you're dumb and I'm making
it. Yeah. The second you get talked down to, you're like, no.
Exactly. Nobody likes to be talked down to. Nobody likes to be, they're not understanding. So if we can make our audience feel smart and feel part, that's where they're going to want to work with us. They're going to want to invest in us. And it's not taking away from how smart we are.
Mhm.
It's just showing I can be accessible to
Mhm.
anyone.
Right.
I can communicate
Mhm.
clearly to anyone. I'm
Mhm.
comfortable talking to
Mhm.
doctors, talking to investors, and
Mhm.
talking to my users.
Right.
I think politicians, in a sense, could probably use some lessons in that as well.
Oi, oi.
Oy.
And yeah, politics just, and it's such fun. But it really is a matter of, when you are a good storyteller, it's not going to matter who you're talking to, because you will have crafted it in a way that everybody can understand at least part of it. I mean, everybody's not going to maybe understand all of it, but you want them to understand enough so that they are brought into it. And that's the important thing.
And we want to, not just that, you don't have to tell them absolutely every detail about how
Right.
it works.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There'll be time for that later.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like going back to dating.
Mm-hmm.
When you go on a first
Mm-hmm.
date, you don't talk about your entire dating
Right.
history and how you want to raise your kids and where
Mm-hmm.
you'd like to be married and what kind of dress you want to wear.
Mm-hmm.
There's time for that,
Right. Mm-hmm.
You also, don't talk about absolutely everything in your life story.
Mm-hmm.
You start off little by little.
Mm-hmm.
So each meeting should reveal
Mm-hmm.
something else. You
Right.
don't have to throw everything at it. Then
Mm-hmm.
they'll bring in, a technical
Mm-hmm.
team that wants to understand the
Mm-hmm.
deep tech about it. So you kind of reveal it. Don't show all your cards at
Mm-hmm.
once, bit by bit.
Mm-hmm.
Build the rapport.
Right. What about asking for their story?
That's a really good point. So if you're talking to a new potential client,
Mm-hmm.
there's some questions that I like to ask clients just to
Mm-hmm.
kind of hear how they respond. So
Mm-hmm.
I ask them, what are you really good at?
Mm-hmm.
What do you wish you were better at? If you could, just wave a
Mm-hmm.
wand and make one change
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, communications, I want to know specifically about
Mm-hmm.
me. What would it be? And then people's answers
Mm-hmm.
that come out, you can learn a lot from. And as you're listening, you can
Mm-hmm.
then gear your message towards
Mm-hmm.
them. But sometimes people just love to talk and love to
Right.
be listened to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So hearing their stories is a
Mm-hmm.
great idea.
Right. And the story, it is, you want it to go along with that. And I want to talk a little bit more about AI, because that's kind of part of the research that can be done. And it's interesting because as we record this, the guest that is on the program right before yours airs, we talked in depth about AI and chat GPT and all of those things. And the amount of, now, again, caveat, folks, chat GPT doesn't go past 2021. So, remember that when you're asked.
It will soon, but
yeah.
not
Oh,
yet.
yeah. And there are others that are getting pretty close. And so, you can kind of combine things, but you can use that to do your research for you. And I have done that. I have said, okay, tell me about this, this, this. Okay, now from that, tell me this, this, this. So you can kind of get it down further and further. And it's the point that Gina brought out last week, and then the point that you talk about in your book. It's not going to replace us. It's helping us.
Yeah.
And if it's giving us better information and more quickly than we could do it on our own, that's great, because then it frees us up to do something else. And to me, that's where we should be using AI and things like that, is as a tool to help us.
Absolutely. So I think we're gonna, a lot of people are a bit nervous that AI is going to take over their jobs, and quite honestly, rightfully so, because
right. For some people, it very well may. Mm-hmm.
So all we can do as professionals
Mm-hmm.
is find our unique offering that stands the test of time and will surpass AI. And like you said, again, we can use AI to make it better, to, shorten things, to sometimes I use it. I get long convoluted emails for people. I'm like, what do they want from me? I put it on ChatGPT and I say, can you give me the key points of this? And if there's any action items, yeah, there you go. So any action items required of me. And that saves me time, because I have to read that email 3 or 4 times to understand what the heck the person wanted from me.
Right. And they should have put it in Chat GPT to write it.
Exactly. And hopefully people will start skilling up a bit more in terms of their writing. And it's going to kick us into action to really find out where our true talents lie. And I'm sure that when Google first launched and search first launched, teachers and parents were like, oh my gosh, the kids are going to have all the answers now. They're never going to learn anything.
I had those answers before. They were called Encyclopedia Britannica and books. It's always been there. It's just evolved as the years have evolved.
Yeah, I agree. And look at my mom used to say, look it up in your Funkin' Wagnalls. I remember we had like that set at home. And yeah, I mean, we had access to it. We had libraries and we still managed to learn. It's then taking it into critical thinking. Right. I think, and my girls go to a school where they've already really adopted, and then they have a AI version for them to use. Yeah. Called Chat Amigo. And it's really, it's incredible to see how they're embracing it. Because like I said, growing up, I didn't know I wanted to be a storyteller because it didn't exist. My girls are one's turning 10 in 2 days and the other one's turning 7 a month later. I don't think that what they're going to be when they grow up exists yet.
I'm sure it doesn't. Yeah. And that's where the AI tools and things are really going to be so beneficial, because it's going to help us get there. And now it can, like we were saying, it can help you with the basics and things like that. You can say, tell me about X company and, or X person, what are their wants? What are their needs? And then what you do is we were mentioning, you do your research, then you tailor your story to fit that. Again, don't lie. But you based on the information that you get that you could have done on your own with Google and Encyclopedia Britannica, you're going to write the story that best resonates with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one thing that AI can't do yet is understand the complete picture and connect the dots from one thing to another and truly understand the person that you're working with and sitting in front of you, because they don't. And oftentimes you'll ask a question, they'll be like, I'm AI. I don't know that.
I did that yesterday. I was in somebody's website and it said, I can't know. And sometimes I do it on purpose. I'm like, can I trip it up? Can I make it get confused?
Yeah. It's interesting to see.
But yeah.
But I think storytelling now Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, said that storytelling is what helped us outlast the Neanderthals. I think it's also one of the things that will help us outlast AI.
Right.
Because this human capacity for telling stories that have sustained generations and gone.
It's that emotion that really is so important.
Absolutely. It's emotion and it's connection and it's resonance and everything that's in there that we connect as human beings. Right. That's going to have to be a very sophisticated level of AI to be able to get there. Now, not to say that it couldn't happen. I just feel like this is something that's still ours, and we want to really remember what makes us human.
Right. And it's in looking at how is it resonating with your audience? Did you have somebody fall asleep, or did they pick up their phones and they're not paying attention? All of these various things. And then you can quickly change how you're doing things. I mean, I didn't go to Catholic school, but I know people who said, they wouldn't be paying attention and sister, what's her name, whacked that ruler down on their desk. You can do those things. And now, you probably shouldn't do that with somebody you're asking for money, but you never know. But yeah, it's that personal element. And again, that's the story. It is not saying, well, our profits were up 200% and we made X number of dollars and yada, yada, yada. It's, I helped my dad.
It's the basic human experience that really is what's meaningful and what's going to stick. Saying stories that stick. It just does. At the end of the day, that's what stays with us. Right. And that's what attracts us to people. I mean, think of speakers that are exceptional speakers, and people usually, when you ask them that, they'll say Steve Jobs or Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, and people that just were able to captivate us and talking in a very eye level kind of way. Now, Steve Jobs did not start out as a great
No.
speaker.
Oh, he was horrible when he started.
But he worked that man, and he worked it again and again. And he just was like, there's a whole book called Becoming Steve Jobs, where they talk about the behind the scenes on that. And that just shows the more you practice, the better you become at it.
Right. So I wrote that down on my notes here, practice, because that is one of the things, you do need to be able to think on the fly, and because there are various things that can happen, and good speakers can deal with that. But it is about practice, 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 and making sure that you've got it down cold. And you've got it down cold and can give it without your presentation, without your slides, because, technology sometimes fails, or, all of these various things. And part of what you talk about in your book is anticipating the questions that people are going to ask.
Yeah.
And I think that is probably one of the most important things, because that's where people trip up. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
So I gave a presentation to a group of founders from an accelerator in Luxembourg that are visiting Silicon Valley now. And as I was going to the workshop, I said, so did you guys bring your crystal ball along so you can figure out what questions they're going to be asking you? And they're like, oh, yeah, you don't need one.
Yeah.
Luckily for us, people pretty much ask the same questions again and again and again in different forms, different formats, varying from here to there. But because of that, we can anticipate questions better. Now, I did make a whole list of the investor questions and group them into groups. So you have like,
again, that's part of those big list of questions in the book.
Next funding round. And on the audio version, I actually read that out. So I've kind of done some of the work for you, but the questions you've been asked again and again and again.
Right.
So really take the time to script out amazing answers for those. The questions that you think you probably will be asked, and the questions that you dread being asked.
Right. And be more prepared for those.
Be ready. Be ready. Now, happens sometimes that we don't have all the answers in front of us. It happens. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't have all the data in front of me. Can I get back to you on that? Works for one pass, but you're not going to be able to say that.
You don't get it, especially if you're asking for quite a bit of money. I don't know. They're not going to give you much. No, if anything.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And I also loved in your book, and we're going back to the structure part, is, you've got the problem that somebody has, and then you're coming up with the solution. And then you're doing the action plan. And so talk to us, because, that I think so many people get caught up in, I've got the latest, greatest thing in the world, that they forget that it might not really be needed, or they might already have it. So they skip the whole problem part. They've got the solution, and they totally forget that there might actually not be a problem.
Absolutely. And that's one thing we never, ever want to lose touch with. Who this is really about.
Right.
Hint,
and it's not you.
Not about us. Not about us. We're amazing. We're wonderful. We're fantastic. Your mother loves you. That's great. It's not about us. It's about the people that need our solution. And the more you know about them, the more you understand about them, the more you know what solutions are out there that they're using today and what's lacking in them, you can be more persuasive that you are the ones that will serve this market. So it's not about us. It's about the audience either listening to us and or the audience that we are impacting with our product, solution, technology.
Right. Right. And central to every story is the villain. And so talk to us more about the villain, because in business, we're thinking, what? There's no Darth Vader. There might be. See, I know.
You did. So here's the thing. I always ask people when I give a workshop, what is the vital ingredient in a action adventure film? And I hear answers like, oh, the hero, the music, the plot, this. But at the end of the day, the real catalyst, the real thing moving everything forward is the villain. And usually we either meet the villain or a villainous act in the first few minutes of a movie or of a TV series. And that's what kind of draws us in. the heroes are only as good. I came up with a new metaphor. So it's like the hero is the moon and the villain is the sun. And the moon is only going to glow if we have the rays of the sun.
You need both.
You need both. So the heroes don't have anything to be heroic about if there's not a big villain to solve. So taking that back to business, we have economic crises. We have security breaches. We have supply chain problems. We have waste and lack of sustainability. We have all of these villains in our lives as humanity that need to be solved. And then one solution comes and another problem is created. So a lot of the same villains have been worked on for years, but from different angles. And then, so hackers get more hackety and more sophisticated. And we need more sophisticated tools to get to them. So we really need to constantly be looking at the villain and what that is, what the cost is. Also, before you transition from talking about the villain in their lives to your solution, talk a little bit about that transitionary moment of, and this is what it's costing, and this is why other solutions aren't working. Like there is a big de facto problem out there that needs to be solved, and we're the ones that are going to do it.
Right. And then, and this is one that we see so many people make mistakes about. They don't do an ask. So at the very end, they're not saying, in essence, buy my product, work with me, give me this money. They just assume that people know. Well, we all know what happens when we assume, right?
Yeah. Yes. Break the word apart. So I always, and I tell this to my daughters a lot, if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Right.
So it's not that they, when you don't have an ask slide, a lot of people's argument is, well, it's going to be a different ask from different people. That's fine. Create a few different versions of your ask slide, but they need to know how much money you're asking for, or if it's not money, if you're selling with the offering, what the expectations are. How much money are you asking for? What will it be spent on? And what will you achieve with it? What is your objective for this round? How far will you get? If it's going to last you 18 months, where will you be 18 months from now? What will the impact have been? Because they're thinking about the next round that they have to fund you for. They're thinking about, okay, I need to see if this is doable, if this is achievable, and will I be able to then join the next round, or at least bring on my colleagues that will take it from here.
Right. And again, if you don't ask, the answer is no. But what happens when the answer is no?
So there's a difference between a hard no and either a ghosting or we'll be in touch. The ghosting is hard because it's almost better to get a hard no.
Right. Rather than oh my gosh, you were wonderful.
I know, exactly. Like I remember my first few meetings when I moved to Silicon Valley. Excellent, amazing, fabulous, fantastic. Totally going to do this. This is awesome. And then crickets. And you're not hearing back from this person. You're like, what happened here? And again, going back to dating, I remember the days were like, been a great date.
Yeah, I thought it was a fabulous date.
And then nothing from the other side. And you're like, what went on? Now, what went on for both of them, I can tell you behind the scenes, is they didn't want to completely close the door. Because they did have a good time. They did think you were great, but there's a lot of other people on their roster that they want to check out first. Sounds kind of annoying, but it's exactly what it is. So they may be interested in you for somewhere down the road. They want to kind of keep their eye. And by not closing the door and saying a hard no, they've left it open. So if after 3 or 4 times someone hasn't responded to your follow-up, that's great. Move them to your quarterly update.
Yeah, they're going to get an email newsletter from you that reminds them that you exist.
We've been hard at work. Here's what we have. And then eventually when you hit big enough numbers or big enough achievements, don't be surprised when you hear from them. Hey,
yeah, because there is that FOMO, the fear of missing out.
Yes. And you need to, so that's another thing. So you do want to keep them in the loop and then not be surprised if you do hear from them. Okay. And then, and be nice, be gracious about it as well. But the FOMO is something that you can actually create within your messaging. So FOMO or fear of missing out, nobody wants to feel like they missed the boat for the next big thing. So if you can paint them a picture to show them how big this actually can get, then and show trends that are converging and pointing there. It can be a behavioral trend, like e-commerce growing 65% in the span of 2 years just because of COVID, or it's sustainability trends, or anything that's showing behaviors of the end market. Another trend could be a regulatory trend. I was just working with a company now, and they're in fleet management, and they told me that by 2025, all buses will have to be electronic or electric. And by 2030, all fleets of trucks will have to prove that they have net zero.
Wow.
So that they have carbon offsets, or so these are things that are breathing down the necks of operators, and they have to be thinking about. And that's motive, that's urgency. Another thing could be other competitors of ours have just closed big investment rounds, and we're even better than them. And this is, we've managed to get here with very minimal funding. So you really want to be able to show why now.
Right. And as part of that, and as part of your ask, you can build in I will follow up with you in 2 weeks. I will, all of those things, because that's the other thing. And I'm, guilty of that just as much as anybody else. We do the pitch and then we don't do anything. So they think that we're not interested, and they were expecting to get a call in a week, 2 weeks, a follow-up email, whatever.
Yeah.
And so make sure that you've got that in there, because if they, you might say, I'll follow up with you in 2 weeks. And they might say, you know what, this is a month-long process that we're doing. Okay, then I'll follow up with you in a month. And so that way it just kind of, it is part of that whole process of, wrapping things up and moving on to the next step.
Yeah. And it's not just that. Don't let opportunities fall through the cracks. So, I mean, anyone that owns a business should have a CRM. I resisted it for a long time. And now
I know
it was a huge undertaking, but it was worth it because I don't miss anything.
Right.
It's all there and it's all captured. At the very least, one tool that I absolutely love is Boomerang for Gmail. Not even though Gmail has come out with things that are like Boomerang, I've continued to be a paying user because I know that I will never have one of those emails that I've forgotten about. It surfaces it for you. So whatever works for you to keep you reminded about things you need to follow up on. And we're all busy.
Right.
And so were they.
Yeah.
And
so it's not a big deal to follow up.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, they have a life.
Right. And of course there is a difference between following up and being a pest. And you don't want to be the pest, but a lot of times with the follow-up, it's just like when you're going for a job interview. You're following up and saying, you mentioned such and such. Here's, I have this great article that you might find interesting. That's all you're doing. Just again, you're reminding them of your existence. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And oh my gosh, we've only got about 5 minutes left, and we just have scratched the surface on this. I know, and there's a lot of great content in your book that, things like, we don't want to have death by PowerPoint, folks. This is not, let's see how many words you can put on your slide deck. Better, it is better to even not have a slide deck, and heaven forbid you turn around and read it. I mean, this is kind of speaker 101, but I love it because in your book, you remind us of that. And so what are some of the other big mistakes that people make as they're doing all of this?
Wow. Where do we even start?
I know, in just a minute or two.
The biggest mistakes, one which we've already touched on, is being too jargony or too technical, thinking that's going to make you look smart. Wrong, does the opposite. 2, stripping away the story because you don't have time. That's going to take the heart away from it. 3, big one, arguing with investors. And I've seen it happen. And it's like watching a car crash happen in slow motion. It's not going to end well. You can see the impact already. Sometimes investors want to see, they'll be a little bit, nudgy, like my 2 girls, the little one, they love each other. The little one will just nudge the big one, just see how far she can get. until the big one explodes. So
Mhm.
sometimes they'll just nudge you to see how you respond under fire. And you don't want to fall into the trap of trying to argue with them. Okay. It's showing that you can be challenged and hold your own and not argue back.
Right.
And just say, I hear what you're saying and think.
Yeah. As opposed to but.
But exactly. So taking the and instead of the but approach. And also, what will it really gain you? Sometimes, and I think you said this before, this is not going to work. And it's one of those things that they're not going to invest in you. You're not going to change their mind. So you just kind of got to go through the motions. But arguing is definitely not going to change their mind.
Yeah. Because that's what they're going to remember. I mean, we're talking about, the sticky part of the story. You don't want the sticky part of the story to be, she argued with me or he objected to what I was saying.
Yes. Because people remember stories and they also remember feelings. They remember how you made them feel. And you definitely don't want that to be something that made you feel like crap. So,
right.
So for sure.
And another thing that you talk about a lot in your book, and this means this is why we have to have you on again, is to know what your why is. And I think so many times people think I'm going to make my why fit with what they need. That does not work. You want there to be a match, but it still has to be your why. I mean, you can't, that almost comes back to lying. If you're making your why completely match theirs, it might not be your why. And Simon Sinek is, of course, the expert in that. And, and it really is, from a marketing perspective, it's where you need to start. What is your why? Because that's going to lead everything else. And it can be things like, my why is I want to retire by the time I'm 50 with $2 million in the bank. And this is how I'm going to get there. Okay. Now that might not be your pitch to your investors, but it's you need to know, why are you doing what you're doing? Back to your original story. I'm helping my dad. That was the why.
But his vision is more than that.
Right.
It's basically giving people control over chronic illnesses.
Right.
Starting with diabetes. But that's the vision. It's not, they can't say curing because there's a whole FDA thing around their whole compliance thing, but this is helping people manage and live their lives to the fullest.
Right.
That's a vision to get behind. It's his dad and it's everybody else like him. And that's a jumping off point from diabetes, which is a gateway disease to cancer and cardiovascular disease and so many different things. But that's a vision to get behind. It's not just we've created the supplement that helps take blood sugar down. It's so much. Yeah,
because the what you're going to get is, well, there's 300 million of those out there. So, but yeah, and it's exactly what we were saying. There might be 300 million out there, but you hooked them in with your story.
Absolutely. You got it.
Donna, this really has been absolutely fantastic. We talked about your book, Sticking to My Story, The Alchemy of Storytelling for Startups. And we'll have the link to buy that in the show notes. And look, there it is. There it is. She's Dana.
So you can get the actual.
I get digital versions, and it's very hard to hold up my computer.
Kindle version and an Audible, which I narrated. So whichever, if you're a visual or an auditory or
perfect.
You need to hold it, be kinesthetic. We've got you covered.
Yeah. So, but tell us, if people want to work with you and connect with you, how do they find you? And what are the services that you provide?
So you can find me on my website, donnagriffit.com, 2 F's, 1 T. And I provide a variety of services. The main service is working on an investor pitch deck, 2 hours. You've got Donna GPT creating it in real time with you. I also do sales presentations and website content. I call these the infrastructural stories, the DNA of your story that will take you several years forward with your company. And then, so you can reach out, schedule an intro call to see if we're a good match. The book you can also find there either on Amazon or stickingtomystory.com.
Perfect. I love it. And you've got great content on your website, lots of great resources. And as I said, I mean, the book really is good. Just the questions part, what are the things that I need to be thinking about before I do this? because we need to let people know we know what the heck we're doing. And so it's all that preparation part so that you're not going in. And if they say, what about, and you go, I don't know. Right.
Definitely.
I don't know, but give me a bunch of money anyway, or buy my product or hire me. It's not going to work, folks. So, answer those questions in advance and then keep answering them because it changes.
Yeah. It changes, and you need to keep your story fresh and keep innovating as things change.
Right.
Be able to pivot your product and pivot your story. Things change, and you have to be ready.
Right. I love it. Well, Donna, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
So the final thoughts are: stick to your stories. They will not steer you wrong, and have really good stories ready for a variety of audiences, because you never know if the next person you meet will change your life.
I love it. Well, I've been having so much fun talking with Donna Griffit. I'm Deb Creer. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.